There's a lot of deep lyricists out there, but very few of these lyricists can slip into a flow like this.
Go subscribe, subscribe.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Brews and Reviews. It is knowledge, and I'm reviewing Lupe Fiasco's new album. Hopefully, if you're a real hip-hop head and clicking on my video, you already know that he's one of the greatest lyricists of all time. He has two Album of the Years, one in 2006, and then 12 years later, in 2018, he has a dense and respected hip-hop discography that's not without its flaws. In fact, his best-selling album is also his worst album, and I have to admit I got a little nervous seeing drill in the title of this, because last time he ventured into another subgenre of music, it was trap with Drogas Wave, which was not my favorite project and one of the worst in his discography. That and Lasers are his only off days. And if you say Food and Liquor 2 was, y'all need to revisit that opinion. Please listen to that album again. Tracks like Strange Fruition paved the way for later tracks like Mural, one of the fan favorites, and Cold War, Bitch Bad. Those are lyrical highlights in his whole discography. One day I'll put out a list of the most hated albums that are actually good, and that'll be on it. But let me get to the subject at hand, which is drill music in Zion. And supposedly this album was completed within 72 hours, and with how much lyrical and musical density we have in this, that's very hard to believe, but that's the story behind it. This was entirely produced by Soundtrakk, Lupe's most frequent producer and best producer. Also note that the cover art on this is very similar to fan favorite Tetsuo Youth, and with the triangular abstract painting. So let's get into this project. The Lion's DEEN. Fittingly, the album begins with the poet Aisha Jaco, who's also Lupe's sister, and she did the intro on Food and Liquor, a little spoken word on Prisoner 1 and 2, and she's been featured on many other Lupe tracks, and this just makes me know that this is going to be a great project, because when she appears, things always tend to go well. The title of this track is a play on words for the Lion's Den, but DEEN actually means the religion of Islam, which Lupe famously is a Muslim, and that's acknowledged frequently in his music, just as it is on this project. Just one example later on is where he's talking about how he doesn't drink, or at least he thinks. Spoken word on this alone, I know it's going to be a long night for me analyzing this project, because when the intro goes this deep, I know I'm ahead for some deep analysis going forward. Some of what she's talking about here addresses the gun violence in Chicago, which turns out to be a common theme for the album, and it's definitely escalated over the last couple years. And let's not forget that drill music was created in Chicago. A lot of people think that drill originated in the UK, but it's a strange journey for drill music, because the UK was influenced by Chicago, and in turn, the UK came back and influenced other places in the US, like Brooklyn. There's all kinds of biblical imagery in this poem at the beginning. Biblical imagery will be a theme throughout, but in this, from Zion to the Red Sea to the Lion's Den, which makes you think of the book of Zion, and of course, Zion also ties into the Rastafari religion, where Zion is the promised land in Ethiopia, and Lupe is no stranger to this subject matter either. See the track Haile Selassie off his last album, and this intro is just a taster and really sets up a lot of the themes that we'll hear throughout the project. Goaty I'm going to pronounce it that way at first, but let me talk about the production. There's a smooth, jazzy saxophone beat here from Soundtrakk, who really keeps it thorough throughout the entire project. But let me get to this title. We know this album is going to be deep because this actually isn't pronounced Gotti, it's pronounced Fish. How is that pronounced Fish? Because GH is F as in enough, O sounds like I as in women, and TI sounds like sh as in nation. So Gotti is really fish, and just like that irregular spelling, everything in this song is pointing to an augmented reality that Lupe seems to say is partly already here and also is coming to take us over very soon. Everything is off as a reference to Neuralink hacking your fantasies. Neuralink is a company that does brain implants and mistaking maidens for manatees. Great alliteration, first of all, on that, but it's also showing that things are backwards because it's popularly believed that the theory of mermaids came from sailors seeing manatees in the sea, but now we're going the other way and mistaking women for something grotesque. And I think this also alludes to young people being too plugged in and actually being so into their technology that they're not able to meet women or significant others because they're so engulfed in this technology. And there have actually been studies showing that the current generation of teenager and young 20-somethings are having much less sex than previous generations because they're not getting out there. They're too involved in this virtual world. And let's also note the water mythology that was so prevalent on Drogas Wave. We hear that a lot through this album, and more on this track about technology overtaking people's lives. He says, "Giant leaps, beware where that landing ladder leads, because you walk up there, but don't take off your mask and try to talk up there. Yeah, because ain't no screams in space." Giant leaps refers to the beginning of technological advancement because when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, he said one giant leap for mankind. But Lupe says beware, as that giant leap got us to this point in time. And after all, space is a vacuum and distant, so no one can hear you scream. But he's drawing a parallel to the technology of now, that social media, phones, and gaming that disconnect people from human connections and conversations. Then the ultimate reversal at the end where he says they catching bait with fish. AUTOBOTO, the first single, and this one carries a lot of the drill sound. Autobot refers to the Transformers. The Carrera is a Porsche, more commonly known as a 911. And Lupe goes a little higher in his voice and presents a cadence that's not often heard from him. In the first verse, he discusses Chicago gang violence, referencing 5 different sets that are literally separated by street lines. And he proceeds to say how this was designed by the government. And an absolutely brilliant line, he says, "What's an infrared dot to a whole .gov?" Basically saying that one little gun or individual doing something violent is nothing compared to really what's going on with the government and the violence that they inspire. And he goes on to refer to the government as a plug. All of this is before the incredible verse 2. And let's acknowledge right now that there's a lot of deep lyricists out there, but very few of these lyricists can slip into a flow like this. The rhyme scheme, because it ends in O, reminds me of Raekwon on Outkast, Skew It on the Barbie. But forget lyrics. I could listen to this based on the technical skills alone, but of course, even better with a lyrical content master such as Lupe, and he doesn't disappoint on this verse, putting on layers in addition to this rhyme scheme. He's talking about his ghost, and a ghost writer, of course, is the first layer, and it's a creative way of saying that he's ghostwriting for his alter ego, who's Carrera in this sense, or vice versa. But also, I think he's saying that he's so far removed from what he wrote on some of his original tracks from when he broke out first in 2006, that version of himself is almost a ghostwriter or a ghost to him now. So he's saying that he's matured in a way. His music and his lyrics have evolved, but both then and now he was still cold. And that beautiful voice taking over the chorus at the end is Nayirah. I think that's how you pronounce it. And she's featured on several other songs on this, similarly to the way that Lupe used Nicki Jean on his last effort, Drogas Wave. And I like how he uses one female guest vocalist throughout the entire project, and it really adds some continuity to the project itself. Precious Things, truly a creative concept here. First two verses are Lupe talking about how his hands are betraying him, wanting to fight against him when they used to give him peace signs. And in verse 2, it's almost like he's saying his hands are a metaphor for two people who grew apart, saying they don't even wave anymore. But in the last verse, it's clear as the point of view shifts to his hands themselves. And they're going to tell him why they're mad, son. As his hands explain, he didn't keep them out of handcuffs. He used them only to inspire fans to throw up their hands in concerts. But mostly, the problem is that he doesn't use his hands to write raps anymore. KIOSK. This is a highlight in production and a highlight in song aesthetic, as Lupe goes drumless in the first two verses, but not like the Griselda style drumless trend that's so prevalent right now. This is very much in Lupe's own style. He's got distortion on his voice and he's rhythmically rhyming to the piano. The lyrics are about the allure of jewelry sold at the kiosk stores in the middle of the mall and the hard sales pitch these vendors give to those walking by, basically saying that you need this and can look like you're successful, even if it's cheap and not the real thing. And I think on the chorus where he says, I think it's more a temple, not a stall, but no, not a religion at all. I know it's kind of simple and it's small, but that's because it's in the middle of the mall. I think that's sarcastic, that people do worship this jewelry as a religion. And let's recognize Lupe hitting some high notes at the end of verse 2 before getting didactic on verse 3, saying the diamonds even take his minds off the world's ills, like where preachers can praise AIDS as God's killing the gays. What a fucking phrase, never ceases to amaze. But when he dies from cancer, that's God working in mysterious ways. That's great, concise points being made here about the hypocrisy of religious leaders. And even deeper when he gets in the next two lines where he says, Jesus saves African sold slaves, referring to Jesus' pieces that Lupe believes are a popular, unnecessary expense in the African American community. And he says, Gabriel's in Afghanistan passing out AKs. Gabriel is an archangel of the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. He was an angel that dictated parts of the Quran to Muhammad, but this meaning probably centers around him being known as the angel that will signal the end of the world. And I'm gonna drink to this track. There's so many layers on this, and I am sipping on a mind over matter. Yeah, this is a summer beer, a wheat ale with orange and lemon flavors, kind of soft for the lyrical density that I'm getting into, but there are layers to it. And this is from Bell's Brewery in Michigan. That's close to Chicago. I should have drank a Goose Island for Lupe, but I got Michigan, that's close enough. So let's get back to the project. Ms. MURAL, and he's setting up expectations here, hearkening back to his epic track, MURAL, and he's done this before because he had MURAL Jr. on Drogas Wave, all great tracks, and this proves to be another great track in the series. And pay attention, this is storytelling at its finest with a twist ending. Lupe is an artist, and this is a version of himself in this particular story as a painter, and this painter is talking to a fan who's inquisitive on what inspires and drives his art. From the atlas imagery and him ripping out the pages, it's clear that he doesn't believe in a roadmap or formula to making music or painting, as the case may be here. Also, it should be noted that later in this album, he mentions having the world on his delts or having the world on his shoulders, like the Greek god Atlas. So this is a bit of connection to that in this song. But he goes on and says, look at the empty canvas, said I think I have a name. I'll call it gasoline pouring on the flames. Basically, he can't produce art right now or chooses not to, and later we'll figure out why. In the second verse, the fan points to a pile of seemingly discarded or throwaway projects. He says, the patron pointed at a pile. Are those rejections or mistakes? The painter said, this is not for question or debate. Most of what we know as art is the projection of a faith, a product of a pontiff for the election of a saint. So Lupe is drawing the parallel to art and money here, specifically bringing up imagery of some of the great works of art like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, for example, that wasn't just some whim or inspiration that Michelangelo did that, but it was inspired by monetary ventures funded by governments and churches. Lupe then says, martyrdom will call Russian roulette in the flanks, and most would pull the trigger if the weapon's full of blanks. He's basically saying if an artist has writer's block or can't produce anymore, he would rather commit suicide than go on with blanking on his art. He goes on to say that he wanted his art to be his legacy. He says, I never wanted my life to be a collection of some dates and holiday my days away and intellectually sedate. In other words, he works hard so that he can be remembered. He doesn't want to just whittle away and relax his life away. He wants to leave some art that will be recognized forever. But alas, the fans are fickle and the demand nowadays is growing too much. Fans are asking too much from artists, too much frequency, too much output. And to keep up for him and create art for money alone is so being fake. It's less like putting on some makeup and more like severing a face. But here's the twist at the end. He's decided to take the fans' demands and burn it all down. He says, the painter asked the patron, can you stand on the pile? I've had a flash of inspiration, my creativeness aroused. The model took its place, the painter grabbed a lighter, doused the shit in gasoline, and set it all on fire. He just burned up all his art, his fans, everything, all at once. Naomi, I was hoping we'd get a little something lighter after the lyrical barrage and darkness of the last track, and we did. This is more upbeat, and the content seems lighter. Besides saying Christ took a knife and Christians killed all the Celts, he goes on to shout out his producers with that light kind of lyricism and talk about food. Even the Malcolm X refrain at the end seems lighthearted as he works in Star Wars and X-Files and Xbox. Yet, I think I might be missing something a little bit deeper on this track. And if you know the true intent, maybe it is a little darker than I'm thinking, then put that in the comments. Drill music in Zion, the title track. Very natural transition to the horns in this from the horns of the previous track. In this, he's just throwing out layers with each line, and I don't have time to decipher everything that's being said here, but I will on a few of them, like the line, Copper Ebonics competent and gone it. Godzilla's economics rock gondolas till you vomit. Basically saying that Ebonics or black language and art is something of value like copper. Gonnet means greedy, so I think he means that the art or Ebonics of African Americans is often stolen and exploited by people trying to make money off of it. And Godzilla economics could be seen as macroeconomics, or the force behind class and status in America, where a small entity like a gondola, which is a small boat, could never survive against the monster like Godzilla, or the monster of macroeconomics. He gets a little more clear with meaning as he goes on. I like these lines. He says, somebody's daughter is contemplating the convent, but a man with $1 is slobbering for her haunches. Mouth is just watering for some nonsense, and this might be the moment her modeling probably launches. He's basically saying that a girl might want to go into a wholesome or fulfilling career until she realizes that someone is willing to pay for sex or something like an OnlyFans, and from there she's corrupted and takes a different path. Seattle, again, we're on the technology theme on much of this track, and how technology is treated like a religion. He says, you could light a fire with a thumb swipe, but you need a lighter. If you got the motion but none of the components, then it's karaoke and it doesn't really matter if it's sung nice. He's basically saying that some artists will post on social media trying to build hype, but it doesn't really matter how much hype they have if their art doesn't have content. And he goes on saying, computers ain't got no souls, but I be giving Dewa to the Pro Tools. Gotta control all your trolls. Don't sulk and soak in your socials. Meaning, don't let people's online opinions sway your art. That's not what art's about. Lupe doesn't worship the opinions of anonymous people on socials, but worships the art itself that he creates with tools like Pro Tools. On phonem, and I had to look this up, but apparently on phonem is a phrase in Chicago that's basically like saying on my mama. So expressing what you're saying is the truth. However, Lupe misspells FOE as FAUX, which actually means fake. So you're saying something really honest, but maybe he wishes it was fake. And this is a clever play on the phrase to create an adverse meaning. And then he proceeds with the most powerful and possibly only 2-bar verse ever. Rappers die too much. That's it. That's the verse. One of the best verses on the album. And not only does it say a lot that rappers die too much, and a lot of those rappers that have been dying lately are from his home city of Chicago, but this is also playing into the whole technology and social media themes that we've been hearing on the album, because this verse is just like people tweet. That's it. That's the tweet. That's a common theme. He goes on in verse 2 to explain why he presented these facts in this way, and alludes to hip-hop celebrating violence too much. And then he shifts subjects and gets deeper, drawing imagery and likeness between a plane and jail, or in other words, the ultimate freedom, the freedom of a plane and going anywhere that you want to go in the world, and imprisonment, complete lack of freedom, lockdown. Then there's even more ponderings from him. He says, what's the difference between a posthumous album and a life insurance policy? Spotify, $1's worth what $1 buy. Go monetize. And the chorus on this, which says, I wish you were lying to me, means that he wishes the violence portrayed in hip hop, particularly from his peers in Chicago, were just made up bravado, but it's all too real. And I will leave it at that. There's more layers to peel back on this album, but I've gone too long already. That's all I can say before wrapping it up with my last thoughts on the album. So let me conclude that Lupe never disappoints. And who's saying that it's a bad year in music? I'm definitely going to have a hard time now coming up with AOTY, because this is a contender, along with several others that have dropped the first 6 months of this year. And lyrically, This is very much in the vein of Lupe's best output, highly conceptual, lyrically dense, only 10 tracks, and I wrote 10 pages of notes for this project. I usually have 4 or 5, so double what I usually have for my review, and I know that I barely just scratched the surface of it. His flows are on point, expert rhyme schemes, and it's safe to solidify Lupe's spot as one of the best MCs ever. And I like the freedom that he's rhyming with now since he got off the major label. It's really coming through in the music. And I'm going to give this a 10 out of a 12-pack. Thank you for watching my review of Lupe Fiasco's Drill Music in Zion. If you like this, go ahead and hit like now and hit me up in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know why in the comments. I drop hip-hop and hops related content consistently, so subscribe to my channel now. And until I see you next time, keep buzzing.
Fucking man says subscribe.
But if he's on his channel saying that somebody's album is better than mine, unsubscribe to that motherfucker.
No, your album's the best, man.
There you go. Subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.